My name is Dan Cohn, and I am very proud to say to you all that I have ADHD. But I wasn't always proud. In fact, for most of my life, I was downright scared that anyone I knew would find out. I was ashamed. I was terrified. We all know the stigma. That kids with ADHD are a lost cause. That they have a made-up disease. That their teachers have given up on them. That they can't focus, so there's no way they'll ever be successful. And there's no way they'll ever outperform normal people. To the ADHD and any learning difference people in this room, let me say directly to you, you are not alone. What I described above is certainly the stereotypes we all face. But let me be equally clear. Those who hold those stereotypes are flat out wrong. And any obstacles you have can be overcome, and one day you just may see it as a strength, as I have. Today I see my ADHD as a blessing. I see it as a differentiator, something that's made me uniquely who I am, and has uniquely positioned me to be a better and more effective manager. But that didn't happen overnight, and without a lot of help along the way. So I'd like to briefly talk to you about my experiences as a person with ADHD, and how family, friends, and teachers helped me see it as a strength that I think you all should see it as too. And I appreciate the opportunity. This is the first time I've really spoken publicly about this. Like many people with learning differences in this room, I grew up knowing something was a bit different about me. Whereas my amazing sister Katie, who is here tonight, and my brother Steve, both of incredible brilliance, were model students, I had a much harder time. Whereas some people's issues with succeeding in school involved understanding a math problem or memorizing certain vocabulary, mine was far more basic. I couldn't discipline myself to even sit down to start learning any of those things at all. I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it badly, but I just couldn't do it. And I would honestly get angry at myself for not being able to do it. For years I struggled this way, but I didn't have a name for what I had. For years I knew many of my peers with ADHD, but I wasn't sure if that was me. And to be honest, I feared the stigma that they had, the extra time on tests, the way the classmate teased them, the medication, all of it. And that leads me to my first point, the incredible role that family can play. It wasn't until I was 14 that I finally did something about the problem I knew I had, but it wasn't because of me. It was because of my amazing mom. Being a doctor, she read in the New England Journal of Medicine an article about ADHD and its symptoms. My parents approached me very gingerly and asked if I wanted to get tested. And like many in this room, although I was kind of embarrassed to do it, I knew I had to. In all honesty, it was almost a relief to finally know I was doing something about it. So I did what many of you in this room did. I had a 2-hour or so diagnosis exam. I read the sequence of colors I saw in front of me, having to intersperse different color names to see if I could keep up. I had to rattle off a sequence of numbers, a very bizarre sequence of numbers. To this day, I just remember how in-depth the testing was. I remember sitting there realizing how silly my preconceived notions of ADHD were. That the outsiders who thought it was just a quick prescription, a quick fix, of fake conditions that doctors haphazardly diagnosed were so utterly wrong. A week or so later, my parents sat me down to tell me what I had realized after doing my own research after the exam was obvious. I had ADHD. I was scared. All the things I had thought about other people, all the stigmas about the kids I knew in school, were all of a sudden me. How could I ever be normal, I thought? How could I ever succeed? And this was the key turning point in my life, my parents. They, in many ways, were relieved of the diagnosis as they understood why I acted the way I did. But here's the biggest point, and something I want all the parents in here to understand. It did help them understand my behavior, but they didn't use it as an excuse. They didn't treat me differently from my incredibly gifted brother and sister. They accepted the ADHD, but they didn't accept it as a reason for me to get away with anything or to lower their standards. In fact, they used it as an excuse to work even harder to help me become a more disciplined person. They told me that ADHD was just a title, and that it didn't change how they felt about me or where I could go. And they proved it, and then they proved it every which way. I remember my dad waking up early in the morning with me, with my vocabulary flashcards, forcing me to go through each and every one of them, asking me over and over again the words I wasn't getting, forcing my mind to be disciplined. I love you, Dad. I remember my mom. I didn't love you at the time, I love you now. I remember my mom making sure that on the days before the tests, the house was completely silent because she knew that the smallest noise would get me distracted. I remember her bringing me food directly to my desk to eat so I wouldn't get up and lose my train of thought. I remember the countless times I forgot to bring my Adderall to school, and my mom leaving her office, she's an eye doctor by the way, and bringing it to me in the middle of the day. So have some sympathy if you're waiting at the doctor's office and might be the kid. And as a side note, for those who criticize medication for kids with ADHD, I think I speak for many in this room when I say that it was an absolute lifesaver. Anyone here who's on Adderall, Concerta, or any other medications, you have nothing to be ashamed of, nothing. It's an incredible tool to help people like us. The support of my family didn't just stop at my parents either. My brother and sister, despite being, as I mentioned, superior in discipline, grades, athletics, pretty much everything, always treated me with unconditional and never-ending love. My sister, in particular, has, even if I haven't, always believed in me. Katie, I will always be grateful. I could go on and on with stories about my parents, my sister, and my brother. Their efforts did two things. First, instilled a sense of rigorous, systematic discipline that has helped program my adult brain for life, making me far more effective as a person. But second, and much more importantly, it made me believe that I, inside, shouldn't use my ADHD as an excuse for failure. It's really easy as someone with ADHD to say, I couldn't do as well on this test, or I wasn't focused enough on this task because of the learning difference. But I'm here to tell you that's unacceptable. That if you do that, you're missing a huge opportunity to develop huge advantages over anyone, learning difference or not. The lessons and teachings from having ADHD, as was said earlier, are invaluable. Which leads me to my next point, teachers. As I mentioned in elementary school, although I was undiagnosed, I had the typical signs of a kid with ADHD. I was not the kid in the front of the room with the good posture, the insightful question, the hand constantly raised. But that didn't stop incredible teachers from going the extra step. It was all about having teachers who believed in me. I had a teacher, his name was Bob Hutchings, Mr. Hutch, who despite being aware of my shortcomings, took the time to mentor me and make me believe I would still be successful despite potential perceived limitations or stereotypes. He taught me the best teachers are the ones who don't just focus on that eager, gifted kid in front of the classroom, but on all of the kids, even those like me who had struggles with focus despite wanting to learn. Mr. Hutch fundamentally changed the trajectory of my life. Organization is another true challenge for ADHD kids in school, and I was fortunate to have a teacher who, when seeing disorganization, didn't give up on me, but pushed me to do better. Every few weeks in my math class, my teacher, Mrs. Waters, asked all the people in the class to show her our math folders to ensure we were organized on top of our lessons. And time again, mine was, you could fairly say, an unmitigated disaster. So one day, Mrs. Waters took me aside. She said, Dan, I know you're smart, and I believe in you. We just have to work together to get this figured out. So day by day, she sat with me, literally supervising me as I hole-punched my handouts and fit them in my folder, reinforcing me the practices of healthy organization. Literally, time and time again. She was strict. She knew if she wasn't going to do it, I wouldn't. But also kind. She saw potential in me, and it made me believe in myself. The fact that both Mr. Hutch and Mrs. Waters treated me this way was key to my success. And to the parents in this room, know that having those teachers to empower your children is absolutely essential. So if I may be so bold, I would advise that during your meetings with teachers to emphasize to them that you don't want your child's learning difference to be seen or used as an excuse to hold your child to different standards than others. That effort from the teachers can make all the difference. I had experience with teachers on the other end of the spectrum as well. I had an art teacher who sent home a report card, and on a scale of never listening to always listening, she checked almost never listens, and added comments that essentially wrote me off as a lost cause. This may sound dramatic, but it was absolutely, positively soul-crushing. She didn't think I was going to be a success in life. She had written me off at age 10, all for an undiagnosed condition. To this day, I remember how it made me feel. And it still hurts to this day. It made me feel small. It made me feel hopeless. And I can only imagine where I'd be if I didn't have Mr. Hutch and Mrs. Waters to counteract that negative energy. I got lucky, but many kids don't get so lucky. So I say to the teachers in this room, when you look out into the classroom, there will be kids at the front with a good posture who get things quickly and always want to participate. But I beg you, keep your eye on those kids who are in the back who aren't focusing, and reach out to them. In many cases, these people could truly want to learn and just need the right coaching to get them through it. Mr. Hutch and Mrs. Waters taught me that's what real teachers do. And my life was forever changed for it. And to the kids in the room who know about the kind of teachers I'm talking about, both the good ones and the bad ones, let me say this. Don't leave this responsibility just to your parents. Ask your teachers to not let you off the hook. Ask for extra help. And know this, just because you aren't getting the concepts as fast as some of the other kids, just because you're overwhelmed when you get a reading assignment of 40+ pages in English class that seems easy to other kids, but incredibly challenging to you as it did to me, doesn't mean you're stupid, and doesn't mean you will be a failure in life. You may have to hustle a little bit more. You may have to work a little harder. But in the end, with the help of your family, teachers, and friends, it will be all worth it. Which leads me to the next group, friends. As I mentioned, one of the reasons I wasn't public about my ADHD is because I was terrified of the stigma potentially attached to me. And perhaps even more than teachers and family, I cared so much about what my friends thought and about losing me. I didn't want my friends to disown me, to look at me differently, or to treat me any differently. I was petrified someone would find out. I remember going into the bathroom at 1 p.m. every day, because Adderall only lasted half the day, to take my Adderall, and having to literally hide in the bathroom stall to take the pill because I didn't want someone to see me and start a rumor. I felt almost as if I was living some kind of secret life. But soon enough, some friends did see me take the pill, and in other instances, I told those closest to me about it. And you know what? Universally, 100%, people acted like it was no big deal. I can honestly say that through my entire life, I don't think I've lost a single friend as a result of telling someone I had ADHD or noticed a significant difference in the way I was treated. And what's more, all of them respected my privacy. Not once did I get the impression that a rumor began as a result. It was a reminder to me of the faith in the human spirit and the respect that people have for one another. Moreover, I ended up having incredible conversations that made me realize how many people were keeping their condition secret too, out of exactly those same fears. People told me they had ADHD too, or they had friends or loved ones who did, and wanted to hear what tricks I used to help it. Many would tell me how helpful it was to them, and I learned so much from talking to them as well. And finally, speaking of friends, I got lucky that my best friend in the world is the one that I married, Amy, who is here tonight. My ADHD is the fuel behind my personality. I'm always on the go, sometimes in ways that would drive a normal person crazy, but it's never seemed to bother her. The fact that I have a learning difference, and the fact that it is likely that as a result, our kids might have one too, never really seemed to matter much to her. To her, she never thinks of me as an ADHD kid. And trust me, she's about the opposite of an ADHD kid you could possibly imagine. Instead, she just loves me for who I am. It's a beautiful thing. One that I forever dreamed I would have in someone I would spend the rest of my life with. And I know that if not for that, if not for the confidence it gives me that my wife is the person to get my back, that I wouldn't be here today. Telling the people most important to you can be the hardest part of all this, but for Amy, it was easy. Especially for people with our condition, the person you marry will be the most important decision you make in your life. And I'm so happy and lucky that I have her by my side. Thank you, Amy. I adore you. Having family, teachers, and friends who supported me convinced me that being open about ADHD could actually be an incredibly positive thing, which led me to the most petrifying and the most fulfilling series of events related to this condition that I've ever had, that reinforced the response I got from all these groups. As Chief of Staff to the Mayor, I'm fortunate to have a platform in which to connect with people. And after many conversations where I realized how much it helped others, I decided I wanted to go public with my learning difference. So I sat down with Mayor Walsh. I had a lump in my throat, my heart was beating really hard. I had never told him, but I had faith because of how incredible a person he is, that his reaction would be similar to others who I had told, who I respected greatly. So I said that I had it, and I wanted to go public with it. As you can imagine, as soon as it came out of my mouth, I looked for any sign in his eyes of doubt, anger, or judgment in his face. And as a confirmation of what a beautiful man he is, there wasn't any. There was nothing but pride. He said to me that I should definitely go public with it. He said to me that I should because it would help people, that even if one person read it and felt good about themselves, that it would be worth it. That this is what public service is all about, making people's lives better, making a difference. So I sat with a reporter from the Boston Globe for an hour and talked through my learning difference. And weeks later, I got the call that we were going live on the Boston Globe that night. So I went to bostonglobe.com and kept hitting reload. And all of a sudden, there was my picture under the headline, Mayoral Aide Shares Struggle with ADHD. The next day, they put it on the front page. I was petrified, yes, my secret was finally out, but felt an amazing sense of liberation. I didn't have to hide it anymore. It was out. I was expecting a response, but what happened was beyond anything I could have ever expected. It became the second most read column on the Globe that day of all of the articles they had published. I got absolutely flooded with emails from parents saying how much it meant to them to hear my story. I received emails from kids as young as 6 telling me how much it meant to them and telling me about how they were so scared about ADHD and that the article helped. And even in the anonymous comments under the article, where people could have easily trounced on the stigma without being identified, people were respectful. These people are not fans of the Walsh administration or me. There was this sense of, I don't like this guy, but I give him credit for this. And in politics, you just take what you can get, so it doesn't matter. A year later, I still get people coming up to me to tell me what a difference it made for them. I recently had a young college student tell me that she printed the article out, cut it out, and pasted it to the front of her school binder for a year to feel inspired. And again, not a single negative or stereotypical comment. I prepared for the backlash or change in behavior of people at work or anywhere else. But instead, all I received were positive thoughts. It was incredible and incredibly heartening. I say this not to brag, but because I want to remind all the kids out there with ADHD who are scared to become public with it that they shouldn't be. Of course, it's your decision. But the vast majority of people will not judge you for it. In fact, they will respect you more and will probably want to get advice from you on the best way to manage it. And you know what? The people who do treat you differently, the ones who do judge you for it, they probably weren't very good friends for you in the first place. So know that being public with your learning difference is your personal choice, but also that you shouldn't fear it. In fact, it can empower you. All of these experiences with ADHD have made me view ADHD as a strength. All of those mornings with my parents practicing vocab, all of those times in which I had to force myself to focus, all of the humility that comes with realizing that you have to work just a little bit harder to succeed has paid off. As Chief of Staff, it comes incredibly handy. Forcing myself to learn study tricks has allowed me to hyper-focus when needed to read a long policy brief or speech for the mayor. My short attention span helps me avoid long meetings. Sorry guys, I have ADHD, I can't be here for more than 15 minutes. It forces efficiency, especially after the article is published, because then I have to say it, you know. It forces efficiency and gives me a great excuse to get out of the meetings. The attention span also makes it easier to hop from one task to another. Learning to be regimented in my habits have forced me to instill regularity in the office. I talk to the mayor at least at the same time every morning at 6:45, have the same senior staff meeting every morning at 8:30, and speak to the mayor every night. That regularity also helps people communicate far more effectively than they otherwise would have. As my experience as someone who needed mentoring and help to get me where I am today has made me a far more empathetic person. Because those who are in need of help or assistance aren't just those with ADHD. There are people in need throughout the city, this country, and throughout the world that need help and may not at first ask for it, like I did. It's up to us, citizens of this world, to make that effort to reach out. I know it has made all the difference for me. Countless people took a chance on me, made that extra effort when they didn't have to, and were persistent. And I will never forget that. So what are some practical pieces of advice that I've learned from all this that might be helpful in people with learning differences in daily lives? A couple things. We ADHD people have brains like popcorn. Things come into our heads and they pop and they leave. So do one of two things. One, always have a notepad with you to write things down so you don't forget. Or two, be modern and download the app Wunderlist. I promise you, it's the best thing in the world. It's a relatively simple list-making app, but has turned me into an incredibly organized person. I have one list that is dedicated to anything I need to speak to the mayor about, and another list for pretty much anything else because I can't manage more than 2 lists. It is an absolute lifesaver and works very well. 2, be very regimented and habitual about tasks you have to do multiple times. For example, this applies to people having ADHD or not. I used to have tremendous trouble keeping up with my personal email inbox. I'd simply get overwhelmed, and as a result, I'd miss emails from people. So I decided to use the regimen and discipline taught from growing up with ADHD and put it into effect. I decided that I would not go to bed on Sunday night each week without getting personal email down to 0. If I wasn't there, I wouldn't go to bed. That simple. Drove my wife nuts. But then all of a sudden, a problem I had for years vanished. It's really that easy. Setting a time, even putting a calendar in there to do it, can make all the difference in the world. And finally, don't be afraid to talk to people about the issues you are having with any help you need. ADHD or not, all of us have strengths and weaknesses. All of us have insecurities in our place in the world. But in my experience, talking and being open about the things I don't know, or actively seeking help for things I know are my shortcomings, has allowed me to be a better, more effective person. Swallowing your pride is no easy task, but it can make all the difference. I've said a lot of things today, a lot of experiences as an individual with ADHD, the fear and the stigma attached to it, and how I've learned to see it as a strength. I mean it not to be self-serving or arrogant, but that I feel like any of us could be up here telling similar stories, and that telling these stories can sometimes be helpful to others. Which leads me to my final point that I'd like to leave you with. As I mentioned today, I genuinely believe that you can use ADHD to convince teachers, parents, and friends that it can be a strength and that they should believe in you. But for this to be effective, you have to believe in yourself. It seems basic, but you guys know it's not easy. Having a learning difference can get you down. There is nothing more devastating than being in a classroom, having the teacher teach a concept, moving on, and seeing people around you get it, but you just don't. It messes with your head and makes you think you aren't as smart as those people. That's not true. The skills you are learning or have learned to manage your ADHD can give you a huge advantage over anyone, learning difference or not. But it's not going to be without work. So you just may have to outwork them. And that's okay. You can do it. Don't use your ADHD or learning difference as an excuse. Just work harder, and you can achieve great things. So for those out there who have just been diagnosed, those who are just trying to manage it, or those who are entering their careers not knowing how this will all affect their success, I say directly to you, you are powerful. You are strong. And you are going to be successful. Use the obstacles that your learning difference throws at you to be better. Use it to empower you and to prove to yourself that you can overcome anything. Because you truly can. I've lived it. So go out there and change the world and all the stereotypes that are in it. I and so many people in this room and far outside of it believe in you. Take that positive energy and use it to believe in yourself. And there will be no limits to what you can do.